first, let me take care of a couple housekeeping items. We will be following up with all of you shortly after this, probably by the end of the day tomorrow, if not sooner. And we'll include in that follow-up a copy of today's slides. So you don't need to worry about that. No need to fast and furious screenshot or anything like that. You'll be getting a copy of the deck that we're using today. And I also wanted to let you know that we updated our website a couple weeks ago, and it includes a lot of great resources I'd encourage you to check out at co3sys.com. But one of them that I'm particularly excited about is we now have an archive of all the webinars that we've done in the past, nicely organized, and we'll be adding this one to that page again within the next day or so. So not only can you get a copy of today's slides, but via our website you can come back and you can watch this as a video at any time you want, or refer your colleagues to it. And when you go there, the thing you'll see is that we have a lot of other great webinars on there. So maybe you'll see some good content on other topics that matter to you when you have a look. Also, if you could use the question and answer function in the GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar software, that'd be great, because we will have a Q&A at the end, and that's how you can submit your questions to be included as part of that process. So with those housekeeping items out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. We'll start with some quick introductions. After that, we're going to get right into the heart of the matter in terms of talking about privacy communities and how they can help, the impact they can have at your organization, and what they can do to help drive awareness as part of broader awareness activities that you have going on at your firm. And then, as I said, we'll wrap up with some Q&A. So first, let me tell you a little bit about Co3 in case you're unfamiliar with us, and then I'll get that ad out of the way and introduce my co-presenter, and we'll get right into the heart of things. So when it comes to breach response, incident response, most organizations follow a process like you see here, where they're doing things to prepare on an ongoing basis as potential situations unfold. They have things they do to assess potential data loss situations. Often they're able to close them out, but occasionally we all know you need to escalate those and generate an incident response plan and follow it to sort of manage that thing on through to closure. And then, of course, you need to be able to report for a host of great reasons on how things have gone, whether that's to keep regulators happy or to share that stuff with senior management. So most organizations follow these processes today. When it comes to privacy or data breaches, we simply have built a software as a service application to help automate this process. And we've spent 2 years building it and have been in the market now for about 9 months and are thrilled to have a good number of customers across verticals that are getting great benefit from this technology, and just as important, giving us great ideas for how to make it better. So that's a little bit about Co3 and who we are. I'm thrilled to be presenting to you today with a gentleman named Bob Siegel, whom I'm sure many of you know either directly or by reputation. Bob is a very well-known guy in the privacy community, and I'm really flattered and thrilled to have him agree to present with me today. He has extensive professional experience in development of privacy policies and procedures, the definition of performance metrics to evaluate privacy maturity, and the evaluation of compliance. He has extensive experience with PCI DSS and Safe Harbor, and is a Certified Information Privacy Professional, CIPP US and IT. Bob most recently served as a Senior Manager of Worldwide Privacy and Compliance for Staples, a Fortune 150 retailer, where his responsibilities included the development, awareness, and compliance for global privacy-related policies and procedures for more than 50 business units in 26 countries. But since then, Bob's gone on to found PrivacyRef to help businesses create, refine, and manage their privacy programs. So with that, I'll thank you, Bob, for joining me today and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Ted. It's a pleasure to be here. Really enjoy working with Co3 and all the things we've done together so far. So let's get right into it and talk about privacy communities. It's one of my favorite topics, actually, because there are some common challenges that we all face, and these aren't unique to the privacy area. but there are things like there are limited resources to get done everything we need to do. And that makes it difficult to keep everyone informed of what's going on and be aware of all the different projects that are happening within your company, especially if you have geographically dispersed operations. If you're based somewhere here in the U.S. and you have a project that's going on in Europe, how do you keep in touch with that and in a more informal way, flybys and the like, on an informal basis, aside from telephone and Skype? There's really not that intimacy that you need. We also face the fact that in those varying business units, even within the same building, you'll have different characteristics. Certainly there'll be different business processes involved, but also the culture will be different. If you go from an IT development organization and watch them for a while and absorb the culture and then go right down the hall to your marketing team, you'll think you've moved into an entirely different building, an entirely different realm because they operate in such a different way. But we as privacy professionals have the challenge of getting the message out to both of those teams in an effective manner. There's also reinventing the wheel. There are privacy challenges that maybe the marketing team has figured out how to address that the IT team hasn't figured out yet. If we get them talking to each other, if we get them working together as a community, we can pull that information in and share it and make it a best practice within the company. And finally, there's just general information flow. I alluded to this a little bit earlier. Information seems to flow a lot better and a lot faster informally than normal escalation procedures and the like. If you have a community, it's easier to go and talk over the fence to find out what's going on than necessarily going and waiting for it to show up in your inbox. So community, this is just a definition that I picked up, I think it was from dictionary.com, is a group that's sharing common characteristics or interests, in this case privacy, and perceived or is perceiving itself as distinct from the larger society within which it exists. With the interest in privacy by a large number of people these days, it's very simple to say, hey, we're putting a privacy community together to figure out how we as a company can work better together and get them to join in and help out. So one of the key aspects, though, of this is you're going to be asking for resources, time to participate in the community. You're going to be asking for someone to help out from different areas around the company. The effective way to do this is to get the senior executives involved and ask them for their endorsement of what you're doing. One of the things I strongly recommend is to have a steering committee put in place, an executive steering committee. They're responsible for providing direction under your guidance, of course, for the privacy program. If you're going to establish initiatives, you can get their assistance for prioritization, for refinement based on their own perspectives, and sometimes even helps with the budgeting process. And finally, when you do have policy or process changes, getting their endorsement and approval helps carry weight as you distribute that throughout the company. From a composition standpoint, I look at including those areas that have the most involvement from collecting personal information. IT, legal, HR, finance, and marketing, just to name a few. This isn't an exclusive group, but these are the ones who have the most skin in the game to getting things done. So we're going to do something new today, something I haven't tried yet. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing the results. There's a poll question that's coming to you, and you should see it now on your screen. The question is, do you have an executive steering committee? And maybe you don't have a steering committee, but you have a single sponsor, or maybe there's no one formal, or you're not sure. Like to see get the results from this, and I don't know, Ted, if we can supply those results at the end of the presentation today, or we have to follow up with that later.
No, that's the plan. They're going to flash up on the screen. Isn't this exciting? 50% of you have voted. Come on, let's get the rest of you guys. But what we're going to do is we'll replace the blank title slide that you just displayed with a copy of the results as part of the deck that we send everybody as a follow-up.
Great. Yeah, I'll be
Let's see,
interested.
we're up. No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'd be interested to see what the results come out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we're at 68%. If we can get to 75, come on, people. You just got to click one button.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and move on.
Okay.
Okay,
So,
there we go. I'm going to close the poll out, and we should see the results.
let's see.
Interesting. So what do you think? There's a few more saying yes than I thought. I thought that would be less than 25%, to be honest.
Oh, no. Good information. Very good. Okay, let's move on here.
Okay.
So what does a privacy community do? Privacy community primarily shares local perspectives. If you have a reasonable sized privacy staff, chances are you're going to be at least 1 to hundreds of people. In the case of the team at Staples, we were 1 to tens of thousands of people that we were dealing with in the organization. It's hard to know what each of those different folks are doing, what each of their departments are doing. If you are looking for a local perspective, either from a department standpoint or a geographic standpoint of how a policy is going to be accepted, running it by a privacy community is going to help. For example, everybody is subject to the white tower syndrome when you're working in a headquarters function. One of the things that I know a company had proposed is to put posters out about privacy, changing the posters on a frequent basis, or a regular basis, so that there was always something up. The messages would essentially be the same, but the posters would look different. Worked great in headquarters. Then we started visiting the different locations. And the posters would be there as well, but if you talk to people, you found out they went up about an hour before you showed up on site, and they came down about an hour after you left. So just because you think you're doing a good program and it's working for what you see, without having your own eyes on what's going on and someone to drive those things for you locally, and getting an understanding of why they may not work locally, you may be setting yourself up for failure. The other thing is the privacy community can do is share any concerns or solutions they may have. Again, if you're not there locally and some incident happens or some event happens, a lost laptop, for example, you can certainly come in and understand how that particular business unit does business, and you can talk to the people involved to see what the extenuating circumstances were. But you can get a better feel for what the business requirements are if you actually have someone on site that's your advocate. And that person can be part of the privacy community. Certainly the community is going to contribute to and build programs either locally or enterprise-wide, other ideas for things that need to be done, and artifacts. That's probably the most important one there. If you've got something that works well at your business unit in San Francisco, why can't you use that same thing here in Massachusetts? Why can't you take it and translate it and use it in Italy as well, with some cultural changes potentially? Membership to the privacy community is pretty much unrestricted. We'll talk more about that in a second. And the members are referred to as privacy champions. It gives them, using that champion word, gives them a little bit of ownership, a little bit of respect, if you will. And it shows that they're differentiated from just the normal person who's working in a particular business unit. So the requirements for a privacy champion are pretty straightforward. They need to have a passion for privacy. Not necessarily corporate privacy, but privacy in general. They need to be willing to drive the initiatives. They are willing to be your representative. If you need feet on the street in a remote location and you've got a privacy champion there, they should be willing to go and do the research you need, dig out what you need, observe what's going on. And finally, they need to work for your company. Now, this one may be, you may feel is a little bit strange because you also need to get people from your, or drive your privacy programs with your vendors. The reason that I exclude the vendors from the privacy community is you cannot have as many open discussions about vendors and their practices and internal subjects if they're present as part of the privacy community meetings. You may want to establish a separate community or a separate council with those vendors because it's important to have them buying into your programs as well. So how do you get these people? You've all got privacy contacts already, I'm sure, in the different business units or different teams that you're dealing with. If you have a steering committee, once they buy into the concept of a privacy community, you can ask them to nominate champions, recommend champions. You can send direct invitations, an email blast for people who are interested, volunteers as they see maybe an internet website or some blog posts that you've done. And finally, you can ask the champions to recruit champions. When I first set this up at one company, we started a privacy community. I think we had 30 people at the initial meeting. Within a year, we were over 100 people. It gets very, very popular quickly. I heard a presentation on communities several years ago that was done by someone from Microsoft. They had 400 people globally in their privacy community. So it's pretty easy to get people interested in this. Now, the community will want to get together occasionally. Whether it's monthly or quarterly generally seems to be good enough to get the community together. I've put together here a sample agenda. Some sort of welcome from the privacy team. Maybe it's the chief privacy officer who's giving that. Maybe it's the person who's your privacy community coordinator. Then having comments from a steering committee member. Have the chief legal counsel come in. Have the chief marketing officer come in. Have them share their perspectives on privacy, what it means to their organization and what the impact is. Maybe tell a personal story about how it's affected them. Having the endorsement of senior leadership is only going to help your privacy initiative grow. Then the next step would be to have some champion, one or two champions, tell what they're doing in their department or in their business unit. Have them tell a success story. Have them give a status report about how privacy is going in their area. Maybe they just completed a PCI assessment. Maybe they just filled out Safe Harbor for the first time. It's an opportunity for the champions to boast about what they're doing and what their programs or local programs are all about. The privacy team can then give an update on programs that they see being more global in nature. And then finally, and most importantly, just here's an opportunity to discuss something that's current in the business environment that you want to share. An example of that may be something as simple. We had a discussion once on a topic where an individual left their notebook and some other papers in a conference room. They came back the next day and it was gone, but the room was locked and it wasn't done by the cleaning crew. We found that out. So we ended up having a discussion about how we could do a better job in letting people know that they should protect their information when it's confidential and shouldn't just be left laying around in a conference room after a meeting. And finally, recognition. You need to let people know that they're doing a good job, and I have another slide on this in a minute. But before we get to that, just another quick poll. We've just done a quick couple of slides on what's comprised of a privacy community and how they get together. Do you think that establishing a community would help your goals, help you meet your goals? And I'll let Ted present that.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. All right, those responses are coming in fast and furious. But what do we think? What do we think is going to happen? They're going to say it's something they need to look into. That's my guess. That's the winner. What do you think, Bob?
I would think you're going to be right there.
Yeah. So what do you think? How many are going to have one in place already? What percentage?
I'm hoping it's 25% or more, but we'll see.
Yeah. All right, we've hit 68%. Come on, people, let's break 70 and we'll move on. That just means one or two of you need to click that button. And there we go. Okay, let me share this with you guys. And there you go. Wow, way more than I expected have one in place already. 40%.
Wow,
I
that's
thought it was
great.
going to be more like 10. All right, we got some people who are on their game.
That's outstanding.
It
Good
is.
news. Good
Yeah.
news.
Okay, let me hide these results so that you can get back to your stuff. There you go.
Okay. So I mentioned recognition before. Recognition isn't limited to the privacy community. In fact, I would suggest it's better if it has nothing to do with anybody who's in the privacy community. It should be focused on someone who supports privacy in any role. I gave a award once to a project manager who had absolutely nothing to do with privacy, but she had helped change our system development lifecycle to include some new artifacts that focus specifically on privacy, and she took the lead in driving the adoption of that through her management team. It was actually very exciting for all of us involved. We wanted to give her a tangible reward. In this case, we gave her a $100 gift card, but it should be a tangible reward, something that they don't necessarily expect, something that don't make a big deal about publicizing. And the recognition should be public. Number one, endorsement by the recipient's management team, I think, is essential. Aside from the fact that you want them to endorse it and recognize it within their own team, the cautionary word is you may have somebody who's done something great for privacy, but there may be some other issues there that the management team doesn't want to recognize them for some reason. So be sure you go talk to their management team first. The award, give it at the privacy community meeting. We had the individual I was speaking about before, we had her, I suggested she attend the privacy community meeting, that there'd be a subject that she'd be interested in hearing about. And she walked into the room, sat through the first couple of presentations. After the champion spoke, we gave her her reward, and she was very, very surprised about it. It was then announced by her manager within her team's meeting, which was great. If you have an intranet, put it up there. If you've got newsletters, make sure it's published there. If you can do it within your organization, take a picture. Let them know what happens. I would make sure that the members of the privacy community feel that they can nominate somebody for an award fairly easily. You don't want all the awards to go to someone in headquarters. You don't want someone who is necessarily well known. The more unrecognized a person is to begin with, the more it's going to drive the awareness and excitement about your program. Okay. So let's talk about awareness a little bit. The last presentation, the last webinar that Co3 managed was from the Employment Institute. Larry does a great job, particularly with the research he does. He's got 10 years worth of data at this point, and without getting into how the percentages were identified or managed on that bottom bar chart, you can see that from Poneman's perspective, people thought they were doing well about 46% of the time 10 years ago when it came to privacy awareness. And while the trend is basically upward, it's grown by to 56%. So roughly a 20–22% growth in awareness effectiveness. When they looked at the areas where people thought they were doing a good job, the six that Larry pointed out that he felt that there was room for improvement was mandatory training for everyone. Only 41% of the companies provided that. Specialized training for high-risk employees, people handling credit card information, for example. Metrics, which is a real passion of mine for assessing training effectiveness. And you can see the others from there. With all that in place, even if you have mandatory training in place for all your employees, think about the number of mandatory trainings you need to take all the time. Think about the number of emails you get during the day. How do you keep privacy top of mind from someone in their daily routines when all they would see is a mandatory training once a year? I would suggest for other areas, we as privacy professionals may not keep those other areas top of mind unless we had something else that was keeping us going. One thing that we found I found is very effective is creating a privacy week. This is an annual company-wide event with some training and sharing of information across the whole organization. Certainly the intent is to provide that information, but it's more to create a buzz. Let people remember that privacy is important. It's very effective to do it prior to the busiest time of the year, so that as people are starting to hit the holiday season, if you're a retailer, for example, that they do remember that privacy is something that you need to keep in mind all the time. It also gives the privacy champions a chance to shine, to show off what they did. And there's two things that are going on during the privacy presentations. During Privacy Week. They are the presentations and something called the Privacy Fair, and I'll talk more about both of them as well. So Privacy Week, as you can see, I'm very big on getting senior leadership, senior executives to endorse what's going on. They should kick it off. If the culture is that your chief privacy officer, your chief marketing officer can walk in and sit down and have an open coffee session with everybody, great. That's a wonderful way to do it, but it gets their endorsement. One thing that I've seen done is a video, and it was actually very effective in that the video had leaders not only from corporate but from each of the business units around the world endorsing privacy. And it was interesting to watch the perspectives change as the culture changes. But because this was well orchestrated, they all had the same basic message, but tailored it to the culture as it was appropriate. Once that kickoff is done, have webinars. Repeat that if you have a time zone issue, if you have a global organization, don't be afraid to reschedule or to schedule that same webinar multiple times during the day so that you can handle Europe, East Coast, West Coast, and Asia, all in their own native time zone. It makes for some long days for the privacy team sometimes, but it certainly is very effective. It's also important to have local presentations. Those presentations done by people, either privacy champions that are locally or someone there who's done something to help the privacy initiative. It shows that this isn't just a corporate issue, that it is a local issue, and you get that endorsement there as well. The other thing that was very effective, I find was very effective, is to get IAPP involved from two perspectives. One is to have the CIPP exam held at your location. When we did this, we had people who had no direct relationship to the privacy team take the exam, pass it, and they became privacy champions. They became standard bearers for us throughout the organization. It wasn't only the privacy team that had to weigh in on everything. And the other one thing that we did is we had an IAPP knowledge net. Within the Boston area, we're very fortunate in that if you host a knowledge net at your location, you can invite people from your company to attend as well. We had a knowledge net at Staples where the chief privacy officers from CVS, Oracle, Monster.com, and I did a panel. It's great having privacy people from around the region show up and participate in that and see what we're doing here. We were doing at Staples at the time. But it was also nice to have people from outside of the privacy team within Staples show up and listen and see what other companies are doing and to see where we stood as a company from a privacy initiative standpoint. So something to take advantage of. So it could be a lot of work to create something like this, to create a Privacy Week. The privacy community owns Privacy Week, not the privacy team, but the privacy community. The privacy team owns the coordination, but you can set up a steering committee, if you will, within the privacy community to define the content, to review what presentations are being given locally versus what are being given as webinars. It's important to have everyone's perspective. That way you've got the interests of all the people included in what's being done. You'll get higher attendance. As far as who the presenters and who the fair participants, certainly the privacy champion should be there. Don't be afraid to reach out to your vendors. If you are a customer of Semantics, for example, we've had them show up and give away demo versions of the software, answer questions, give presentations. We've had Verizon come in and talk about their breach reports. Recognize privacy leaders from outside of your company. I mentioned the chief privacy officers that were there at the IPP meeting, KnowledgeNet, for us. People are willing to come in and speak, and you can get them. And sometimes they'll want to also speak to your executives, your steering committee, as kind of a sales tool. But it may be worth it. Maybe some interest to go through that. And finally, internal teams who have nothing to do with privacy. Get the encryption team to talk about why encryption is important and how to encrypt email. Get other organizations, get the marketing team to show up. Somebody from the marketing team to present why privacy is important to marketing and what you can and can't do with mailing lists. It's getting those people involved, getting them to participate and show what they've done, gives them recognition for the good work that they've done, but it also gives ideas to people who are attending about what they can do to improve their privacy programs. And finally, create a privacy game. It could be very, very simple. One that I've used effectively in the past was getting copies of various artifacts, customer receipts, resumes, credit cards, that all had different categorizations within the privacy structure. Some were public, some were confidential, some were classified as private, some were corporate restricted. If you have enough of them, you just have someone come up and say, gee, you're supposed to know the classifications. Let's see how well you do, and have them go through it. It's certainly fun to have anybody in the company do it, see how well they do. It brings awareness to the fact that you have different types of privacy requirements for different documents. But also, it's great to have your leadership do it. We once did it with the president of a Canadian business unit for a company, and people were standing around cheering him on as he got things right. It was also a great endorsement of what we were doing as a team. So how do you publicize this? Posters are certainly one good way. Emails, not necessarily from the privacy team, but get a C-level executive from the company. If you can get your CEO to send it out, if you can get your chief privacy officer to send it out, that's great. But also get the agenda, the schedule for the privacy week sent out from the steering committee members to their teams, so that it shows that, yeah, you can take an hour or two, whatever, out to attend these webinars, that they're important to these privacy executives as well. But you need to do something a little bit offbeat, something memorable. Talk to the cafeteria staff if you have one and say, could you rename your items? Create something like firewall fried chicken, PI pasta salad, encrypted eggplant parmesan. Give them a glossary of terms, of privacy terms, and let them go have fun through the day and make up new names. What this let us do is, while we had the privacy fair going on during the lunch hour, it reminded people that, yeah, something was going on. It was a question, of just reminding them that we were there. Another time that you have a great opportunity is Global Data Privacy Day. It's always celebrated on January 28th. I've used this in the past not to focus on lots of things internally, but to focus on one single topic. This year, every year there's a single topic defined about what Global Privacy Day is. So by taking that topic and applying it to your company, or just to general privacy practices in general, is something that works very well. And again, I go and rename those menu items just to keep top of mind that there is something there. Of course, there's always going to be training. I look at training three different ways. Number one, new hire training when someone comes in the door. When somebody walks in the door, there's a lot of information that's going to be provided to them very, very quickly. A lot of forms they're going to have to fill out. They're going to be inundated with things, and they're not going to remember what's going on. A 4-hour orientation is not something that is unusual for a company. So what I recommend is let the HR team, whoever's driving the new hire training, do a slide or two on privacy, but leave the ultimate responsibility to the hiring manager to explain to the new hire what their responsibilities are from a privacy standpoint. part of that could be leveraging core training that the privacy team involves. And by that I mean the privacy team should be giving presentations just on the enterprise-wide privacy policies and some privacy basics, maybe a PCI 101 class or a HIPAA 101 class. This way, the privacy team can have a standardized presentation that anyone in the team can give at any time. Maybe it should be scheduled regularly so people who have missed it before can have an opportunity to attend. But there may be some need for some in-depth training as well, maybe some specialized training for different teams. That targeted training should also be given by the privacy team, but it's more of a training upon request or in response to an event. So, for example, I mentioned before that notebook that was left in a conference room. There was a training put together for that marketing team to talk about how they could better protect their things when they have to leave it in a conference room overnight, because that's where their work was done, and when they leave things on the board. That was something the privacy team worked with the marketing team to put together and made happen for them, very geared to what they need to do, and it became more memorable for them to fit their jobs. Other ways to get things out: a privacy blog, a privacy news, and leveraging articles in the local newsletter. The privacy blog, if you have that capability on your intranet, would be fantastic. If you can target a weekly publication, it's a lot of work, I know. That's why if the privacy team shares it, different people can take different subjects, different perspectives. But I recommend that the subjects be there of general interest, something that may have absolutely nothing to do with the company. For example, how to protect your privacy on Facebook. It's something that people outside of the privacy community, if you will, are interested in. The idea of leveraging the privacy blog is to get people interested in the fact that you do have a privacy team, that there are implications to the company. So by taking subjects that are of general interest, it piques their curiosity and it lets them watch what you're doing, gets them focused more that the company's interested in their well-being as well, not just the well-being of protecting the company's private information. Local newsletters are a little bit different. I recommend that the articles there be internally focused. So if there's a new policy that's come out about protecting geolocation information, for example, a newsletter would be a great place to do it. And because it is locally focused, it can be very much attuned to what the business practices are in that local environment. In this case, it doesn't have to be the privacy team that's doing it. The privacy team may give some information, may give an outline, but the privacy team, privacy champions could write those. Again, it's coming locally. It's showing them that there's an expert that they can go to locally for the readers of those newsletters. And finally, there's always other ways to contact. A privacy mailbox is invaluable. Again, if you have a geographically distributed organization, particularly multinational, I'd recommend regional instances. For me, for example, I am not multilingual. If I was reading a privacy mailbox and got an email in Italian, I'd be hard-pressed to understand what's going on there, except for maybe Google Translate. But when you set up a privacy mailbox, think about some way to institute some anonymous reporting capabilities. There may be instances where people see that there is a concern that their manager is doing or their team is doing, and they don't want to be identified as the whistleblower. So if there's a way to allow them to report things anonymously, either to the privacy team or maybe through an ethics reporting hotline you may already have in place, that's a big win. Always do flybys, meaning go by somebody's desk, just talk, see how things are going, grab a cup of coffee. You get more information informally than you do anywhere else. If you're headquarters based, I'm sure there are visitors coming from the field all the time. Take the time to have lunch with them, chat with them, cup of coffee, just see what's going on locally. Doesn't have to be a privacy champion, could be anyone on the team. And finally, posters. I look at posters being two different sorts. One of a positive reminder, it's everyone's responsible to protect our customers' information. It might be a message. Maybe short and sweet. The other type I look at is something went wrong. We lost a notebook with confidential information in it. Laptops have been misplaced or lost. Be very direct about what the implications of those things are. The initial take when my team first started doing posters was just to do the positive reminders, and the marketing team came back and said, what do people do when something goes wrong? We don't know. And we found that these event-related posters became very, very effective. They contained a lot of detail, and they were the only posters I've seen in the company where people actually stopped, pointed, read the detail, and understood what was going on and what the implications were for those incidents. So that's a quick overview of privacy communities and some ways to leverage the communities to improve awareness. Ted, have we got any questions?
Yeah, we do. Thank you very much for doing that, Bob. Great job. Remind everybody that you can use the questions function in the GoToMeeting client to submit questions for Bob and or I to answer. Some of you have already done so, but we have a few minutes. We'll try to get to as many as we can. And if you get them in now, then we may have the opportunity to address some new ones. But let me pull from what I've got so far here. One of them is, how receptive do you find people outside of the privacy team are to presenting a privacy-related topic?
That's a good question. I actually, I really haven't seen a lot of resistance to it, assuming they're comfortable presenting. They've done some real good work. They've made a difference, and they're being recognized. And so they are willing to step up, and they are willing to participate. If somebody, like the encryption team I mentioned before, they do, that's their full-time job. They're kind of in the background. If they do it right, people may not recognize that they're there, so getting them in front of people was well received by them. If they're not regular presenters, it certainly makes sense to do a walkthrough of the presentation with them, go over what they're going to say, how they're going to say it, just to give them some pointers here and there. And then, of course, there are always those people who are really nervous about doing the presentation. Frankly, I found that letting them do a webinar as opposed to a presentation in front of people works better because they're alone. It's almost a conversation between the couple people sitting in the room about the slides. They don't have to have the concerns of being in front of a room with lots of people standing in front of them.
Right. Good advice. Here's one that came in. It says, how do we determine the real cost associated with a breach investigation? Is there a tool or template that we can use?
Did you want to take that, or?
Well, I'll take a stab at it. I mean, we have some related stuff within our product, so I can't help but point that out. And if you want to learn more, you can go to our website or just contact us, and we'll show it to you. We do a potential, as part of our assessment functionality, we have some pop-up results that show you, based on the characteristics of a potential data loss situation, the number of records, the types of data, that sort of thing. We can show you, if that's a real legitimate incident, the kind of work that you'd have to do, notify State's Attorney General, notify these consumers, and so on. And we'll also do an estimate of the fines associated with that event if you didn't complete those tasks, based on fines as defined by, say, the state regs on breach disclosure. There also is, of course, the annual at a minimum, and then there's some related research that the Poneman Institute does on the cost of a data breach that gets into some other aspects of it, like the cost of sending out notification letters, the costs of setting up credit monitoring, that sort of stuff. But those are all sort of in and around breach response. In terms of stuff specifically associated with a breach investigation, I'm not sure. I don't know if you've seen anything that's that pointed, Bob?
Just the Poneman work, which I think this year was $204 per record per incident, but they focus on the non-huge, the mid-size and smaller breaches, in that they don't take into account some of the extremely large breaches in their figures, which is good. It's the smaller ones that are the ones that get you all the time.
Yeah, right. Okay, here's another one that's come in. Do you have any specific suggestions for types of metrics for tracking awareness?
Good question. one of the things that I actually like to use is a maturity model. I actually just completed or I'm in the process of completing some work with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and they're as a privacy lead for an audit, and was able to leverage the gap maturity model to see how they're doing, how they fit along the range. They're well-defined stages of how an organization is doing, whether they just are ad hoc or whether they're optimally managed, depending on what's been documented and how that documentation has been applied. It's something that's easy for senior management to understand, which is important in all of that. Other trends that I tend to look at is the number of items that get raised through your privacy mailbox. You'll see as that awareness goes up, the number of emails to the privacy mailbox will go up. Because people are more aware that, number one, you're there, number two, they're getting reported or have questions for you. But there will still be a large number that you never see, but at least it's an indication of what direction things are going in. And finally, it's the number of projects that you're aware of or the number of incidents. There may be some incidents, there will be incidents that occur that the privacy team will never hear of, just by nature that people don't want to report them because they think it's a negative. But you'll see that as your awareness goes up, the number of reported incidents as opposed to events will go up because people are more aware that you're there.
Right. Good stuff. Thank you. All right. Finally, we'll do one more. We're coming up on the hour here. Any tips for getting executive buy-in and participation?
It's hard to get executives one-on-one time, but if you go up your own hierarchy to the leader of your team and get their endorsement of the privacy agenda and have that work with them to get introductions to their peers, to get time with their peers, either for them to carry the message or for you to carry the message to them, that's extremely helpful. One of the other things that is useful is to leverage that Poneman number to show how much cost is potentially at risk of data that you're sharing or data that's not being protected properly. Now, if you just use a number and multiply it out, it may not come up with a realistic figure, but it'll come up with a number that that's so large that it can't be ignored. There is an equation that I don't have handy with me right now that I've used in the past to temper that $204, including factors like what's the probability of the data actually being lost either internally or by a vendor, depending upon the maturity of those two organizations, for example, that we were able to get some credibility with the equation. Again, with the number of records that were being shared, the number was so large that the risk really wasn't there, but putting something in a dollar figure is something that an executive can relate to fairly easily. And even if it shows that it's $30 billion worth of risk, which is ridiculous, it's not going to happen, it catches their attention and start paying attention to what's there in privacy and what they have to do to protect data.
For sure. Yeah. Other things we've seen people do is use press stories in the press about peers in the industry perhaps who've had a breach. That's a great wake-up call that speaks in terms that executives can surely relate to.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites. I think I said once that the best publicity a privacy team can get is a breach at someone else's expense.
Yeah, yeah. Or even if it's an unrelated industry, if it happens to just be somebody in your area that they would know, a well-known company in your geography can do the trick. And then the other thing is if there's any changes in legislation or just letting them know about legislation that may not be on their radar screen and what the potential impact of that could be, right? So certainly if you've got any instances of a local company or a competitor that's got the Attorney General after them as because they didn't do response appropriately, that's another tactic that will definitely get their attention.
Yep, and that's a good point for the steering committee. One of the things that have been done for the steering committees I participated in is giving them a regular legislative update. What laws are pending, what's the probability of them actually being signed.
Yeah.
So they became more knowledgeable when they talked to the board of directors, when they talked to the audit committee. They were able to speak intelligently about what's coming up for them as well.
Yep. Great point. Okay, Bob, I think we're out of time, so if you could go to the next slide for me, please.
Sorry. No.
There we go. So here's contact information both for Co3 and for Bob at PrivacyRef. As we wrap, I just want to thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. To give an hour out of your day to listen to content like this is a huge investment, and I really hope that you found it to be a worthwhile one. If you've got any questions or want to learn more about either of our offerings, here's the ways that you can go about doing that. But then finally, Bob and I would both welcome any feedback that you've got on this session. So if there's things you like, things you didn't like, things you wish we had talked about that we didn't, please let us know. And then finally, on Co3's part, we try to do these every other week and are always looking for ideas. So if you've got a great idea for a webinar topic, or maybe you didn't even think of it in the terms of a webinar, but just something that's been eaten at you and you'd love to get a broader perspective on it, please use this contact info to get in touch and let us know about it. Because it would not be the first time that we grab that idea, we find somebody like Bob or Larry Poneman or somebody else in the industry, and we put together a webinar to get you what you're looking for. So with that, I'll thank you, Bob, very much again for joining me today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity.
And we'll thank all the rest of you for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.